Yossi Ginsberg in the Bolivian Amazon jungle, 1981. Bolivia is a landlocked country in Central America and is a former Spanish colony. It was originally known for its plentiful silver mines, but sadly in modern times it's better known for being one of the world's major suppliers of cocaine. In November 1981, Yossi Ginsberg, an idealistic 22-year-old Israeli, had recently completed his service in the Israeli Defense Forces and Israeli Navy. After doing several odd jobs, he had saved up enough money to travel in search of excitement and adventure. He was especially eager to explore the lush Amazon rainforest before its wonders and indigenous people disappeared forever. Ginsberg had chosen South America in particular for his adventure because he wished to pursue a life as extraordinary and unconventional as his idol Henri Charrière. Charrière had written in his autobiography Papillon, for example, how he jumped off a steep cliff into the ocean with a sack of coconuts and a pirate friend to escape from his brutal penal colony on Devil's Island before eventually reaching nearby Venezuela. Ginsberg left his family and home in Israel in the 1970s and lived with nomadic tribes in Sinai, Egypt. In the latter half of 1981, he headed to Mexico, hitchhiked through Venezuela, and then on to Colombia and Peru. On his way through Colombia, he had met and become close friends with an amiable Swiss primary school teacher by the name of Marcus Stam, and they had decided to travel together. After this incredible journey, which had taken Yossi several months and thousands of miles to complete, he now found himself in the ancient city of La Paz, the capital of Bolivia. There, he and Stam met Karl Ruprechter, a charming Austrian who introduced himself as an experienced geologist in the region and a treasure hunter. Ruprechter told them how he was about to set off on an expedition deep into a remote part of the uncharted Amazon jungle in search of some precious metals. Enthusiastically, Ginsberg and Stam agreed to join his expedition, along with an American photographer named Kevin Gale, despite the long list of possible dangers, including territorial tribesmen, formidable predatory cats like the jaguar, poisonous frogs, venomous spiders and snakes, blood-sucking leeches, and deadly disease-carrying mosquitoes. Unperturbed, they then set off on a short journey by plane to the village of Apolo, and then rode for 2 days in a riverboat, delving further into the rainforest to the village of Asariamas. Here they encountered a primitive tribe who'd rarely seen pale people before. Their destination was a remote indigenous village called Toromonas, which could be reached by crossing the mountainous region around the Asariamas River. Ruprechter estimated for the journey to be a 6-day hike, but the going proved slower, and soon their supplies were running low. They took to hunting the local monkeys and eating their flesh. However, Stam refused to do this, and soon he became very weak from the onset of starvation. Stam also developed an infection which caused his foot to rot, making it difficult for him to walk, and therefore forcing the group to turn back and return to the nearest village. It was here that Ruprechter suggested an alternative route along the Tuichi and Beni rivers by raft. This would then take them to the small town of Huerenabaque, a place located 250 miles away from La Paz and was normally only accessible by trekking the infamous and treacherous Yungas Death Road. They paid some local tribesmen to help them build a raft capable of carrying the group and a large amount of supplies to go with it. Soon, they were on the river in their newly built raft, and they were about to enter San Pedro Canyon when suddenly Ruprechter declared he wouldn't go any further and that they should walk. He said this area was well known for its treacherous series of rapids, deadly waterfalls, and dangerous half-submerged boulders, adding it would be suicidal to travel any further. To make matters worse, Ruprechter confessed he had never learned to swim. His fellow adventurers were both disappointed and frustrated by these unexpected revelations and started to lose faith in Ruprechter's leadership. It was decided that the group would split in 2 directions. One group consisted of Ginsberg and the American photographer Gale, who would carefully continue downstream on the raft to Rarenabake, while Ruprechter and Stam headed on foot in a different direction towards a village called Ipurama. Both groups vowed to meet up in La Paz by Christmas and then plan their next move. But shortly after they set off on their separate ways, Ginsberg and Gale's raft lost control and broke up near a powerful waterfall. Gale managed to make it safely to shore, but Ginsberg was swept downriver and over the tall waterfall. Amazingly, he survived the fall and he too made it back to the shore. Courageously, he then made his way back to the spot upriver where he'd last seen Gale and spent 4 days and nights searching in vain for the missing American. Ginsberg then spent the next couple of weeks wandering around, completely lost in the dense jungle with no supplies or idea where he was. He survived on what few berries and edible roots he could find. On 2 occasions, he had to rescue himself from the perils of a bog, and on another occasion he nearly drowned when the whole area around him became flooded after a particularly heavy and violent rainstorm. He was only saved after climbing up a tall tree and clinging to it all night. By the second week, he heard a plane go by overhead, and when nobody noticed his frantic screams for help, it broke all remaining hope he had stored up inside. He collapsed to the ground in despair. Yet it was at that moment that he imagined a weeping woman appeared lying next to him. He felt such an overpowering sense of responsibility to help her, to rescue her, that he found the motivation to continue on. Despite this, one of his feet started to rot from a severe tropical infection and greatly hindered his ability to move. By the 3rd week, things for Ginsberg were starting to look hopeless. The skin on the soles of his feet had peeled off and were reduced to painful, fleshy clumps. Mud looked more appetizing than his food supplies of infested rice, and all of his energy was being spent simply lying on the riverbank exhausted. Once, he heard buzzing coming to his right ear like a bee was about to attack him. But when he looked up, he saw a canoe with a tribesman and, to his sheer delirious delight, Kevin Gale. It turned out that Gale had been found 5 days after being washed ashore by local fishermen, and he had subsequently made it back to La Paz. On finding none of the others there, he informed the authorities and the Israeli and Austrian consulates that the expedition was a disaster and set about organizing their rescue. As for Ruprechter and Stam, they never made it back to their destination of La Paz. They were never seen or heard of again, despite several extensive searches of the area. Shockingly, it emerged that Ruprechter was in fact a wanted career criminal who was being hunted by the Austrian government and Interpol at the time of his disappearance. And rather sinisterly, it was found out that he had a reputation for leading groups of naive backpackers on fake expeditions and then robbing them of their gear and money. As for Ginsberg, he ended up spending 6 months in hospital recovering from his ordeal, and later published his account of the jungle escape in 1985. He went on to achieve degrees from Tel Aviv University in Israel in Jewish philosophy and business administration. More recently, he's been notably active in promoting ecotourism in Bolivia and helped set up the 4.5 million-acre Madidi National Park in the south of the country. Today, he's a popular motivational speaker and lives in Australia with his wife and young children. He also still stays in touch with Kevin Gale, and they become lifelong friends.